Hello and welcome everybody, this is Roland Hartmann from Graphic in Motion, and in this tutorial I will show you how you can create this watercolor intro. So let's take a quick look at what we are going to create. You see that we have this animation where some paint splatters and watercolor splashes are animating on and the camera is traveling through it, and in the end this brush stroke reveals a text. And this is exactly what we are going to create. So if you follow me along on YouTube or also on VideoHive for a while, then you probably are familiar with this style. I created a watercolor and ink slideshow a few years back, or 1.5 years back now, and this became pretty popular. So I just want to show you this, just that you get an idea what you can do with this kind of style. And you see that in this case you can enter some titles, you can also enter some photos or even videos, and you can create a nice slideshow. So if you want to purchase this template, it would be really nice, you would support me and I will be able to continue making free tutorials. So you will find the link to this template in the video description. Then you can of course also buy these elements in a pack. I will show you in this tutorial how to create these elements, but if you want to save time, if you just want to have 38 pre-animated watercolor stains and paint splatters and brush strokes, then I want to invite you to buy this pack. You can also get this through my VideoHive profile. I will shortly show you what is included. You see we have a very similar style than the watercolor slideshow and also in our tutorials. So a lot of useful things, they can save you quite a bit of time, I think, and are very useful for different kind of projects. So again, you can also find the link in the video description. And last but not least, I want to show you that you can also use these elements to create something like this. This is a paper style, watercolor style logo intro, also one of my templates, and you can also get this through VideoHive. And you see it also features the same elements as the two projects before. And to bring this to an end, I just wanted to point out that even Public Records made a lyrics video for Christina Aguilera's song Anywhere But Here with my template. And this is really pretty awesome, this made me kind of proud. And so I wanted to mention it. You can also check this out on YouTube. Okay, so enough self-advertising. Now let's go into After Effects and get started with this tutorial. Before we start creating this intro, I would recommend that you download the assets or the footages that we need for this tutorial. And you see this is a folder, you can get it on my website. The link will also be in the video description. And inside we have 3 PNGs, one brush stroke, one paint splatter, and one watercolor stain. And then we have also a paper background. So just download this and import everything into After Effects. Just select them and drag it into your project. And now we're good to go. I want to start this tutorial by creating our watercolor stain. So we will now just create each of these elements and animate a reveal matte, and then later on in the second part of the tutorial we'll build this together to this intro you saw in the beginning. So let's just take the watercolor PNG and drag it on our composition icon to create a new composition. And you see now, there's nothing, it's black on black. So if I activate my transparency grid, you see that now at least I can see my stain. But of course I want to change this. I want to invert this so that we have a white color here. So I just will quickly go to my effects here and search for the invert effect and drag it on my layer. And now I can also turn off my transparency grid again. What I wanted to mention is if you want to create these stains on your own, then you can take a look. I created them with Photoshop, so you can take a look around the web. There are a bunch of watercolor brushes that you can use to create these kind of stains or brush strokes. But you can of course also take paper and a brush and watercolors or ink and can start to draw your own stains and brush strokes. So if you import your scans to Photoshop, then make sure that you get rid of your background. Okay, so let's quickly check the composition settings. Composition settings are okay. This is the size of the original size of this PNG. I just want to make sure that we have a duration of 5 seconds. And in my case, I will produce this in a frame rate of 25 frames per second. And I will leave the name on watercolor. Everything is okay. Now I want to make a new layer. And this layer will be my reveal matte. So I name this. Okay, and now I need to create a circle. Therefore we use the generate circle effect, and this will generate us a circle. We cannot really see it now because it's white, so we'll change the color to a slight or bright red. And now I will use this circle to create a reveal matte for my watercolor stain here. So first of all, I want to animate my radius. I want this radius to start, of course, at a value of 0, so I will set a keyframe to 0 on frame 0, and then I want this reveal to be approximately 2 seconds long, so I set the radius to a value of, let's say, about 450. So I wanted to cover everything in the picture, but I also want to have kind of a margin so that we can play around with this circle later on with some effects. So let's set it to approximately 450. That's quite a good value. And let's check our keyframes here. Okay. And now you see we have a circle growing. Awesome. Now I want to add some turbulence to this effect or to this circle. And therefore I will use the turbulent displace effect. So let's search for this and let's drag it on our reveal matte layer. And now we will play around with the settings a bit to create something like an organic looking paint splatter that will reveal our watercolor stain. So let's change the amount here. I will increase the amount a bit, quite a bit actually. Not sure which value is right, but I will just try it. And I want to decrease the size of it. So let's see. It should somehow match the size of our stain structure here, but I will continue adding effects, so it must not be perfect right now. So let's say a size around 10 could work, and my amount is now set to 420 approximately. So let's see what this does and how this looks. And you see that this already creates kind of a nice organic looking build-up. If I now set my watercolor PNG here, the track matte, to alpha matte, actually if you do not see these settings here, you can press F4 and switch between these options and the track matte options. So set it to alpha matte, the track matte, and then you see that we have already a very simple looking build-up. But it looks not too bad, so I will leave it at these values, and I will continue to make this a little bit more interesting. And therefore I will use the Roughen edges effect. So let's type in Roughen and then just take it and drag it on our reveal matte. And I will quickly turn off my alpha matte. I just want to see my reveal matte and I want to see what I'm doing here. So let's zoom in a bit and let's start playing with the Roughen edges effect. So actually I want to make this a little bit more organic. I want to add a little bit more detail to these edges. So first of all, let's increase the border. Next step is to decrease the scale. I want to make this a little bit finer. So I will zoom out that I have my resolution at 100% to see what I'm doing. And I want to increase the edge sharpness maybe a little bit. You can play around here with these values, it's totally up to you which kind of style, which kind of look you create. And it also has to do how your paint splatter is looking, because it should fit the borders, like the scale here should be approximately the same, but it's not that important because we will create a few instances. It will happen pretty fast, so don't waste too much time here. Let's take a look what this does, and I think it's not too bad. I will increase the border even a bit more. If I increase the border too much, I will lose a lot of detail in my build-up, you see, but I don't care about this, so around 20 would be nice. Let's see. Well, it doesn't look too bad. Now we'll activate my track matte again and we'll take a look what this does. And actually I really like it, so it looks really cool. Okay, so I will make a quick RAM preview. I'll shorten my workspace and make a quick RAM preview to take a look. And I think it looks really good. What I want to change is the timing, because I want it to fade out a bit. So in the beginning it should be fast, and in the end it should slow down a bit. Therefore I simply activate my include this property in the graph editor button here, and then I switch to the graph editor, and we want to play around here with our keyframe interpolation. So simply select the last keyframe, and then we use this function, the easy ease in function here, to make this a little bit slower in the end. And now I want to drag this point here to around 15 frames. Let's see what this does, and I'll make a quick RAM preview again. Now you see that in the beginning it's happening very quickly, and then it's getting very slow. And what I actually want to do now is I want to set a new keyframe, because you see I'm already finished with my reveal at around 1 second, and I don't want this. So let's set a keyframe at around 1 second and 5 frames. So add a new keyframe, and now we will simply get rid of the last keyframe here, take this one, drag it out to 2 seconds. I hold down Shift so that I cannot change the value here, so that it snaps. And now I can again just adjust my curve a bit. And now let's take a look what this does. And now I have a little bit of a better timing. So sorry if you hear crazy noises in the back, or my cats are going crazy right now. They are fighting and chasing each other. So yeah, sorry, no way to stop them. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Now let's go back. Let's go out of the graph editor, back to our timeline. And now we can create a few instances of this effect. So select both layers and press Ctrl D twice. And now we have 3 copies of our reveal. What I want to do now is I want to change the transparency of our PNGs. So the one on the bottom I want to set to 50%. The second one I want to set to 75%. And the last one I will leave at 100%. What I want to do now is I want to sequence them a bit. So let's go to 5 frames. Let's select 2 copies and let's move them forward. Now let's go to 10 frames. Let's select the top copy and let's move it forward. And if we take a look, what we have now is, you see, it gets a little bit more organic. So what I want to do now is I want to change some values, because now I have 3 copies of the same build-up, and that's not so cool. So I want to change a few settings here. Let's deal with our second copy, and let's select our second reveal matte here, the middle one. So let's move a few frames forward with our marker here to see something, and we are dealing with this one here, you know, the one in the middle here, in between. So now I go to my effects. First of all, what I want to do is I want to change the evolution of the turbulent displace. This will just give us another shape so that it looks a little bit more random. And you can take whatever value you want just to create another shape. You could also start playing around here with the size to get a completely different look on this stain here. Maybe I will decrease the size a bit here, just something like that. 14 now. And now we can also change the border or the rough edges effect. So in this case, we could make it a little bit bigger or smaller, whatever you feel like. Maybe scale a little bit up like that. I don't know, let's see. It's not too bad. And now we take the top copy, the top reveal matte, and we start playing around here too. So let's change this value, the evolution, maybe a little bit to the minus areas. And now we will make a smaller border. Or no, let's make it bigger, actually, a little bit bigger. And the scale like so. Also a little bit bigger. Fractal influence, also a little bit bigger. No. And now edge sharpness, decrease it a bit. Let's see what this does. And I think that's not too bad. Okay, so we are nearly done with our first element. Let's take a look what we have. It could need some more organic movement. And to add this, I will add an adjustment layer. So let's go to layer and select a new adjustment layer. And with this adjustment layer selected, I will add another instance of a Turbulent Displace effect. What I want to do with this adjustment layer is to displace all layers beneath it. So if we take a look here and if we change the amount, you see that now everything is warping around, and this is exactly what I want. So what I want now is I want to animate this value. So let's say I want to start at negative, I don't know, 50 maybe. So let's set a keyframe at frame number 0 at an amount of negative 50. Now let's move to 2 seconds and let's set this to 0. And now we can play around a bit with the settings. So you see now it's just a little bit of bending, and yeah, this gives a little bit of additional organic feeling. So what I can do here is I could probably take down the size a bit. So let's see, let's set this to 52. Let's make a RAM preview to see how this looks like. And you see it just distorts this slightly. So a little bit of more of an organic feeling. What I want to do now is I also want to change the keyframe interpolation here. So let's simply again go into the graph editor and let's select, I don't know which value, it's right here. I think I have the other value active here too. Yes, so I have to deactivate this one. And now I only have my value in the adjustment layer, if that's right. Yeah, okay. So let's select this keyframe and let's add an easy ease in, and let's add this, or let's drag it out a little bit. So new preview. And this looks really good. Okay, let's get out of the graph editor and we are done with our first element. Let's go back to our project window and let's select our paint splatters. I will drag the paint splatters again on my composition icon here to create a new comp, and I will invert this again that we can see it. And I will also use the circle effect to reveal these paint splatters. Therefore I create a new solid and call this circles. I could also name it reveal matte. Let's name it reveal matte to keep consistency here. Okay. And now we take the circle effect and add it to our reveal matte. And what I want to do with this circle effect, first of all, we'll change the color again so that we can see what's going on. And I also want to lower the transparency or the opacity of our reveal matte for a moment so that I can see through it. And what I want to do now is I want to create a bunch of circles covering all these parts that I want to drop in one after each other. So first of all, let's lower the size here, or the radius, and let's drag our first circle right here at this bottom part here. So at the first part, we'll increase it a bit more so that I have these elements included as well. And I want it to, let's say, stop right here at this edge here, right here. Okay, and with our radius set to a value of 32, I will create keyframes. So I will move forward 2 frames and we'll set a keyframe at a radius of 33. Now I will move forward to frame number 0 and set a keyframe to 0. Now I want to duplicate my circle here to create a second one. And if you take a look now and select the circle and drag it around, you see that I cannot see my first circle anymore. To make both visible, you have to change the blending mode on the second circle to normal. And now I will decrease the radius of my second circle and make sure that your time cursor still is on frame number 2 here, so that you get, because it will create a new keyframe if we change the radius value here. Make it a little bit smaller, and now I will line it up so that it covers pretty much the second part here. So maybe I'm going to make it a little bit bigger to also cover this little paint strokes here, like that. And now I will create a third circle. So let's duplicate this one again. Let's drag this one, oops. Let's select our third circle and let's drag this one up here. So to reveal these 2 parts here, I will make the radius a little bit smaller here. Drag it up here, looks quite good. And I will duplicate it again. Now let's say we will make a small part here, so I will decrease the radius quite a bit, and I just want to cover this part here. And now, yeah, you see this is a little bit of tedious work, so it lasts a while. You have to create point after point or circle after circle after circle. And so that you don't fall asleep here while I do this, I will simply pause the recording, and yeah, you can pause the video and put circles on each of these elements, and I will be back when I'm finished with my covering. Okay, now I'm finished. So you see that I covered nearly all of the visible parts here, and now I have 20 circles here on this layer. And if I press U, you will see that I have 2 keyframes on each of these circles. And if I take a look at the animation now, you will see that they pop up at the same time. So this makes not much sense because we want to sequence them so that it's like, paint dripping down on the floor. So what we want to do is we will simply sequence these, and we will make this by hand. So let's simply make a little bit more room here. And now I will select all my keyframes except the top 2 here, and then I will start dragging these out. And it's important that you create a little bit of randomness here, so do not make the same distance between each of these keyframe sets, because then it's too in order, and we need a little bit of randomness to make this a little bit more organic and a little bit more natural. So you see that I tried to change the gaps between the keyframes a bit, vary it a bit, make a little bit a bigger one here, and now maybe 3 or 4 small ones in a row. Like that. Now we can also, now we can make a bigger gap again. Just make a little bit of a variation and keep your eye on the overall length. So I do not want this to become too long. So around 2 seconds is a good goal. Let's see, maybe I will exceed the 2 seconds a bit, but no problem. Let's see, bigger gap here. And a bit of a bigger gap between the last ones. Okay, so now let's make a preview. Oh, doesn't look too bad. What I want to do now is I want to increase my opacity here to 100 and set my track matte on my paint splitter here to alpha. And now let's see what we have. Actually, I'm pretty satisfied with this, so I think the timing is not too bad. But yeah, you can play around a little bit more if you want. For the sake of this tutorial, I think it's perfectly fine. Okay, great. So now let's move to our third and last part. So select the brush stroke, drag it down on the new composition window, and again add an invert effect to make it visible. And now we will create a reveal matte for our brushstroke. This time I will use a shape layer, and to create this shape layer I will make sure that I didn't select any layer, so that I deselected everything in the timeline, and then I use my pen tool to create a stroke. And this stroke should be just straight and just a bit wider than our stroke. What I want to do now is I do not need any fill here, so I will disable the fill option. I want to have a stroke, and I want this to be quite big. So I want this to cover up our stroke. So let's say something like 210 is a good value. Okay. Now I want to create a quick animation, and therefore I will go into my shape layer. We can again call this reveal matte. And I want to add to the contents, I want to add a trim paths effect. So let's select the trim paths here. And then I click this small icon here if you didn't get it. Add, then trim paths. Okay, with the trim path we can now animate our stroke. And we want to set the end value on frame number 0 to a value of 0. And make a keyframe. And now at around 2 seconds we will set a keyframe to 100. And now you see we have, of course, again, a slight animation. Now I want to change the interpolation of the keyframes again. So let's go into our graph editor mode here and let's enter the graph editor and again select the last keyframe and use this easy ease in. And let's see, I'll drag it out a bit to make it even more, to decrease the velocity in the end here. Looks not too bad. Let's see. Quick RAM preview. Yeah, I could do this even more here. So like that. So it's faster in the beginning and in the end it should slow down quite a bit. And I think that's not too bad. Otherwise we can come back later and adjust this a bit. So for now I go out of the graph editor and I will start adding some interesting details. And to add some details I will again use my Roughen Edges effect. So let's go to our Roughen Edges, drag it on our reveal mat and let's start to play with some values. So first of all let's increase the border to something like 20. Then I want to decrease the scale that we get some finer details. I can also increase the edge sharpness a bit to make it a little bit of a sharper edge and increase the border even further, 45 something. And if I use a alpha matte now, you see that we already get kind of a build-up. It's not really looks perfect like a brush stroke, but yeah, if you want to create a really fast reveal, then you could use this. But I will add a little bit more detail here. So let's turn off our track matte here to see what we are doing, and let's turn on the reveal matte again. What I want to do is, you see we have this option that's called stretch, width or height. And if I move this value to positive, then you see that we stretch this on a horizontal axis, and if I move it to a negative value, then we stretch it in a vertical direction. But in this case, of course, I want to stretch it on a horizontal axis because then we get this nice looking edge here that looks nearly like a brush stroke. Maybe I should leave my track matte on, my alpha matte, because you see now we have this kind of a brushy looking edge here, and that's pretty cool. Now I can change the settings a bit more. So let's increase this, or let's decrease the scale a bit more to get a little bit finer brushes here like this. And maybe I make this a little bit smaller, the border, like something like that. Edge sharpness could be a little bit bigger. We just need to take a look a little bit of our brush stroke, you know, the structure of our brush stroke. So how could this look? And I think that this is actually not bad. The only problem that we have got here now is you see that the direction of our details here is not following the direction of our stroke, because if we take a look at our stroke, it has a slight S shape here. And I want to simulate this shape. Therefore, we have to pre-compose our reveal matte. So let's select our reveal matte and let's press Ctrl Shift and C, make a pre-comp of our reveal matte. Okay, and now I want to make it visible for a moment. Let's turn off the alpha matte and let's lower the transparency here because I want to see what happens underneath my matte. And with my reveal matte selected, I want to use an effect that's called the CC Bender. So let's type in CC Bender, let's drag it on our layer, and now you see we have these 2 points here. And if I increase the amount, then you will see immediately what this does. So it is bending everything in between these 2 points. So we have our base point here. So the base point is the one which will stay in place. In our case, we want to bend it down like this. So I need to set my base point around here, and I will reveal more of my stroke here to see everything. So let's set the base to around here, and let's set our top point to around here. And now, of course, I have to decrease my value to a negative value to get this shape here. And this doesn't look too bad. I can reposition it later on. I just want to recreate this shape more or less. So let's say we set it to -40. And now I can also play around with my position here a bit to get something that's matching our form. Doesn't look too bad. Okay, now we can duplicate the CC Bend effect and we can set it or reset it to 0 for now. What I want to do now is I want to bend it the other way. So we want to bend it down here. So I simply take this point, set it over here, around here, because here it starts to bend in the other direction again. And now I change this to a positive value. So let's say something around 14 to 15. It's not too bad. Can adjust it a bit. Like that. Okay. And now I create a third instance of this effect. And let's zero this out again. And let's take our base point and put it in here. And let's take the end point right here. And now let's make another negative bend, just to make this slight, the slight direction change here. Okay, so it doesn't look too bad. Now let's take our reveal matte, the whole layer, and let's move it up a bit. And you see that I made this shape a little bit more obvious than it is in our stroke itself. But if we enable our track matte, so first of all, let's increase the opacity to 100, and then let's take our alpha matte, we will see that it should fit. Let's see. It does in the beginning. It does not quite fit in the end, so I should change it a bit more. Let's go in here. Let's select our benders here. I think that this is a little bit too much here. Maybe decrease this a bit. Now let's go in here and decrease this a bit too, or increase the value so it's not so strong. Okay, so let's see what this does. Yeah. And now I'm satisfied with the direction this is going, and I think it looks not too bad. So let's create a quick RAM preview. And you see we have quite a nicely organic looking brushstroke animation. Okay, so perfect. So you see now we have created our 3 elements, and now we are good to set up our intro. Therefore we create a new composition, and I want to take a 720p HDTV 720 25 frames, and let's make this a little bit longer. We'll make this 10 seconds long. Click OK, and I should have named this, so I will do it now and call it intro. Oops. Okay. Now let's import our beachy paper layer here, first of all. Then let's import our watercolor element, our paint splatters, and of course also our brush stroke. And if we take a look here, I cannot really see them because they are all white, but we'll change this within a minute. First of all, I want to deal with my watercolor element. So let's turn off the other one for a moment. And what I want to do now, we can do this right now, is we can press F4 and make all these elements 3D. And now I want to change the background, so I will position it and move it really far to the back. So around, let's say, let's put in 7,000 here. Now you see it's pretty small. And now it's the right moment to create a new camera. So let's layer and let's select new camera. What I want to do is I want to use a 1-node camera because I do not want to make any rotation, so I do not need the 2-noded camera, and I want to make it a little bit of a wide angle camera, so I will use the 24mm preset. And now you see that my background is gone. So let's scale this up so that it's visible again. And I will scale it up so that it covers this. It covers our whole frame here, because I know that this will be the end position of my animation. So if this just covers our frame, then we are good. Perfect. Now let's start to arrange our elements in our scene. First of all, I want to colorize this so that it looks a little bit more interesting. So let's go to the effect and let's use the effect tint and drag it on our watercolor element. And now I want to change the map white 2 value to, let's start out with a grayish or a very dark background pattern. So I will set this to nearly black. You could actually just set it to black. Okay, And now we want to lower the transparency quite a bit here, because this will be only a background, you know, only a very, very slight little stain, watercolor stain, not too obvious, but yeah, a little bit. We'll add a little bit to our scene. So let's set it to 15 for now. We can change this on fly. And let's change the name so that we know what it is to gray. This is our gray watercolor stain. Now I will duplicate this by pressing Ctrl and D. And now I will set this to let's say blue, because I already have in mind what I want to do here, and I want to make this one blue. And I will set the transparency or the opacity of this one to 95. Yeah. And I will change the map white value to some kind of a bluish color here, a little bit darker, you know, because now we are working with the watercolors here, so something like that. And now we can just click OK, and then we can just start rotating it a bit on the Z axis like that. Scale it down a bit maybe, just to create a nice background for our animation. And what I also want to do, and therefore I will quickly change to two views, because here I have my top view. I want to separate these on the Z axis. So the gray one, the gray watercolor stain, should be a little bit in the background here. So let's type in, let's say 500 here. And you see now, move this back. And you also see that now we have to change the scale a bit. So let's make this bigger again. 145 looks quite good. Then I want the blue stain to animate in. So I will set this to a position, let's say, of, we have 500. Let's set it to 350. So let's make 150 in between of these. Not too bad. Can scale it up a bit. Like so. I will duplicate this one, call it red. Change the color to red. A bit brighter maybe. And of course now I want to change the rotation again. So press R to reveal the rotation properties. And I just want to put this in like that. And now I can move it on the X direction here, a little bit to the right, so that it overlaps a little bit. And I can change this position here to, let's say 200. Bring it a bit forward. Quite cool. And if I want, I can now select these two layers, or actually all the three layers, and press F4. And then I can change the blending mode here to multiply. And you see that changing the blending mode will add a little bit, or will help to create an organic watercolor look, especially in the areas where our paint splatters or our watercolor stains overlap. So let's make the blue one a little bit bigger. I want to scale this up a little bit. Like so that we have a little bit more overlapping going on here. And I think for now it looks not too bad. Now I want to add my brush stroke. So my brush stroke should be right in the middle here. So we will leave it where it is. It should be at position number 0, set axis or set value. But I want to scale it down a bit because I think it's a little bit too big. Something like that. And I want to move it down a bit so that it's a little bit more in the middle here, like so. And now let's also add a tint effect, and let's change the map white to something like, I don't even know what this color is called in English, but you see what I'm doing. Like so. Okay. And I also want to change the transparency or the opacity here to 95%. I will not change the blend mode in this case, because if we change this to multiply, you'll see that, yeah, it's gone and it doesn't look good. So I will leave it at normal in this case. And now, last but not least, we will add 2 copies of our paint splatter. So the first one, we will set this to a value of -150 on the Z axis. And now let's position it a bit. So one of them will be, let's say, down here in the right corner. I can scale it down a bit, like so, and rotate it maybe on our Z-axis a bit, like so. Now we can also colorize this, so let's use the tint effect, and for this one maybe I take over this dark color here. Could look some quite cool. It's not too bad. I can lower the opacity a bit so that it's not so obvious. Let's set it to 80 and maybe change the color a bit to something a little bit more interesting. Well, like that. Looks not too bad. Okay, and now I just want to duplicate this paint splatter, create another copy, and change the position to -300, so then this is even further or nearer to our camera. And now we will put this up here, and we can rotate it. Maybe we'll simply rotate it on 100 for 180 degrees on the y-axis, because this will more or less mirror it. And now we can create a little bit of a different look. You know, if you have more elements, as they are included in the pack that I showed you in the beginning of the tutorial, then creating these kind of compositions is of course way more fun, because we only have 3 elements here. But you see, even with 3 elements we can make quite good designs. But if you have 38 or even more, then you can create something really awesome. So let's scale this a little bit down. That's a little bit smaller, so that it's not looking exactly the same as this one. And now we will change the color, and here I will take over maybe a slight color from here, make this a little bit darker. Yeah, not too bad. So I like this layout. And what we can do now is we can create our camera move. So if you take a look at the animation right now, you see that they animate in all at the same time, which I of course do not want. So I will sequence them. But to sequence them the right way, first of all I have to set up my camera move. So let's go to our camera layer. Let's press P to reveal the position. And at around, let's say 5 seconds, we want to add a positional keyframe. And you already see that I made my elements only 5 seconds long. So after 5 seconds they disappear, which is not so cool. So let's select all of them. Let's press the right mouse button and let's select time and enable time remapping. I could have just set the duration of my compositions to 10 seconds before, but I didn't do that. So I have to correct this now. And yeah, actually, if you think about buying the pre-rendered elements, the pre-rendered pack, the pre-rendered paint watercolor elements, then you can use the same techniques to change the duration of these pre-rendered elements. So let's see, you see that funny wise, the watercolor stains stay on, but the brush stroke and the paint splatter still disappear. So we can correct this pretty easily. Just move forward 1 frame, set a new keyframe on the time remapping here. So let's set a new keyframe. Let's delete this one here. We will do this on our paint splatters layers. And we will also do this on our brush stroke layer. So set a new keyframe, delete the last one. And now we see that everything will stay in place. This is exactly what we want. Okay. So now it's time to create the camera move. So let's close my layers here and concentrate on my camera layer. And with the camera layer selected and with my time marker at frame number, yeah, let's say about here, so that I have something that's visible here, I will simply move my camera forward so that it is slightly behind this last layer here. So we can see this here. Very good. So let's say a value of 505, because we know that this element is exactly at 500. So we will move 5 frames further, or even a little bit more. Let's say 520. If we have a little bit going on. Now I will take my keyframe and move it to frame number 0. And you see now we get this animation. Of course, I want to change the timing here. So let's select include this property in the graph editor set, and then we will go to the graph editor. And now I can simply separate my dimensions because I'm only using the Z dimension here, the Z axis. So I can turn off X and Y because then it gets a little bit easier to work with these. And I again want to create an easy ease in here. But in this case, I also want to create a slight easy ease out. So I want it to start slower, and I also want it to end slow, and I want it to end even slower. So I will drag this one out quite a bit so that I have a faster movement right here, but in the end, it will be smooth and slow again. Let's make a quick RAM preview just to check our animation, the camera animation. I think this is not too bad. So let's go back to our timeline. And now we can sequence these layers here. So the first one which will come in is of course our gray background layer. So let's see. This is coming in. Maybe I want it to come in a little bit later. Let's see. A little bit later. Then around 1 second and 5 or 7 frames. I want my blue one to come in. I will change to one view again because we do not need this anymore. So like that. Let's see. This one's coming in, this one's coming in. Around here I want my red one to come in, so just move this over. I could actually move all of them a bit forward. Let's see. So now this one is coming in. Now that one, that one. Around 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, I want my brush stroke to animate on. So I will simply take all these elements and move them forward. Like so. And then at around 3 seconds, I want my paint splatters to start animating in. And the last one, let's say, will animate in really in the end at around 4 seconds. And let's make a quick RAM preview to see what we have. Actually, it's not too bad, but I think right here is a little bit too fast. So I want this to come in a little bit later. So both of them a little bit later. And this also maybe even a little bit later. Let's make a new RAM preview. There you see you can play around with the timing and create whatever you want. Actually, I think this is now a little bit too late. I want this to happen a little bit earlier so that it's nearer to the camera, because later on I will turn on my depth of field and then this will get a little bit more interesting. But I think that this doesn't look too bad. So I think that the timing and the animation are quite good. I'm satisfied with that. Okay. So now we can add a title, and therefore I simply take my text tool and I will type in Watercolor intro tutorial, and I can make my text white. And now I position it in the middle above my stroke here. And what I want to do now is I want that my stroke is revealing my text. So first of all, let me change this a little bit. I do not like 100% whites in this kind of animation because this is not, 100% white. It's not real or not looking natural. So let's decrease it a bit. Yeah, like that. Better. And now I want to create a reveal matte. So what I want to do is I want to simply duplicate my brush stroke. First of all, what I have to do, of course, is I have to set my watercolor layer, my text layer, to 3D, otherwise it will not work. Then I will move it underneath my paint splatters. I will duplicate my brush stroke layer by pressing Ctrl D. We'll move it above my text layer, switch to my track matte options, and set a track matte on my text layer to alpha matte. And now you see text is visible again, and now you also see that it will animate on with my brush stroke, and this is exactly what I want. Okay, so you see that we are more or less finished here with our basic setup. What you can do to increase the look a little bit is, of course, now you can create a vignette. You definitely know how this is working, so let's do this very quickly. Create a new solid, change the color to black or slightly nearly black. Okay, call it vignette. Okay, add an ellipse mask. Press MM to reveal the mask path or mask settings. Change it to subtract first of all. Change the mask feathering. So change the opacity to something like, I don't know, 50. And now you see we have slight vignetting going on. And then of course you can also start playing around by adding another adjustment layer and add some color correction. So let's do this quickly. Adjustment layer. And let's use simple RGB curves to create a quick color correction. So maybe we increase the contrast a bit here. That's too much. Just a tiny bit. Then we can go into our blues, maybe increase them in the shadows a bit, but reduce them here a bit to create a little bit of a vintage look. Add a little bit of green in the heights, reduce the green a bit in the darks. You know, just whatever you want, you can create your own look here. And last but not least, I will add a little wiggle to my camera. So I will reveal the position and then I will hold down Alt and click my stopwatch on the X position, and I will add a wiggle of, let's say, 0.5. That means every 2 seconds we will change the camera value for around 20. I will copy this expression. I will add it to my Y value. Hold on Alt, click the stopwatch, paste it in, and the same with my Z position, paste it in. And now let's see what we have got. And you see, I think that we have a pretty nice intro. What else can you do? You can, of course, enable the depth of field. Now let's move in a little bit further and let's change some settings here. So maybe increase the aperture a bit to about 35. Then you will see that this will get blurred. We can even increase it to 50. Makes it maybe a little bit more interesting. So when the elements are near the camera, they will be blurred. And you see now we have a little bit of a problem here with our title layer. It is visible before it gets revealed. So let's take this layer and make sure that this doesn't happen. So we will simply drag the beginning, the endpoint, right here to the endpoint of our reveal mat to make sure that this will not happen. And now we are finished. Okay. So this is it with the tutorial. I hope that you liked it, that you learned some useful techniques and tricks. I just want to invite you again to check out my Video Hive templates, as I showed you before, the watercolor and ink slideshow. You see, yeah, using the exact same techniques, only a little bit of a more complicated camera move. Then I added a few more details. Of course, there are more paint splatters, more paint stains elements, and also a few particles in here. So check out this project if you want to buy it. I would be really glad, because if you support me that way, then I will be able to keep producing free content for you guys. As I mentioned before, you can also get these pre-animated watercolor stains, paint splatters and brushstroke elements. They are very useful if you want to create these kind of animations and save a lot of time, because you do not need to go through the tedious process that we went through in the first part of our tutorial. Here you have everything set up, pre-rendered and ready to go. And last but not least, there is my watercolor and ink logo reveal template. Uses the same technique, similar elements, and of course, in this template there are also some watercolor elements included that you can use. So this is it for this tutorial. I hope that you liked it, and if you liked it, then please subscribe my YouTube channel And I would also appreciate it if you visit my website, which is www.graphicinmotion.com. And you can see that on my website, I have a bunch of After Effects templates. You know, there are really many different projects. And of course, there are also more tutorials. You can also find all the tutorials on my YouTube channel, but also on the website. Then we have a bunch of stop motion graphics, freebies, we have some textures, some project files, and so on. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope to see you soon. Goodbye.